好，同志们，好，同志们，我们都在轰轰烈烈的站起来，站起来。Welcome to the 281st edition of China Now with your gang of two. Nan Su, who is the senior investigative reporter for Epoch Times, and yours truly, Michael Olson, who long ago was dissuaded from being a China hand by the great helmsman himself, Mao Zedong. Each week, Nansu and I look out across the broad expanse of the Pacific Ocean from our home port here at SantaCruzVoice.com, and we ask, China now, friend or foe, war or peace? Ni hao, Nansu.
Hey, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, depending where you are.
Good. Well, Nansu, there's peace in Iran. What do you think? A great deal.
Uh, I'm hoping the peace will actually eventually comes. I'm not that optimistic. Taking thinking about the past record of the Iranian regime that they always make just like the Chinese regime, they always make a promise, and then just before you you celebrate it, they will change to do something else. So we don't know. Especially right now, there is the latest news says that actually Iranian regime still under control. The true leadership it's still the Khamenei's son, the little Khamenei. So he's a hardliner now, but I do think that Trump administration already, see some good opportunity that can lead to some sort of negotiation. Basically, they see some sort of opportunity for some sort of substantiate the condition for negotiation. So I think that's a good start, but I don't know how it's going to end up.
Well, I certainly don't either. But given the characteristics of who's running the show over there in Iran, not too optimistic. You brought something up in your conversation, just like China. You said Iran was, and I've been thinking a lot about that lately, Nansu. It seems like China isn't really China; it's the CCP. And it's like more like a prison in a country. You have a warden and his guards, and they own everything and they control everything. And their whole ambition is to preserve their grip on the country. Now, it appears as though Iran is the same way, only instead of the Chinese Communist Party, it has Shia Islam and the I don't know the religious uh, precepts that it holds as being one and almighty. So you have two organizations that control two countries, and their sole ambition is not so much the country that they control, but their control over that country. So when we're negotiating with these people, we're not negotiating, trying to find a better way for their countries to run on behalf of their citizens. Their only concern is the party or the religion. And so how do we negotiate with that?
Well, I think there is a big possibility, I believe that they're just playing the games. They're trying to drag the time as long as possible so that because they see that the midterm election in the United States is coming, possibly after this coming midterm election, that the Republican Party probably will lose its a majority in maybe in the House. I'm not sure how it's going to go in the Senate, so that the political environment in the United States will change dramatically after that. And so far that we see the majority of the Democrats representatives, they are opposing the war. So that I think that there is a chance that I think it's a pretty good chance that the Iranian regime is just trying to play this, keep things dragging on and on and on and on until after midterm election, maybe beginning of the next year, they will have a lot easier. They're going to face a lot easier situation. So I think maybe that's the game they try to play.
Mhm. So, what you're suggesting is what a lot of people are suggesting, in that the war is in the hands of the Democrat Party of the United States. If the Democrats win the midterm elections, we lose the war in Iran.
Well, I don't think we're going to lose the war. I think I'm just thinking the earlier that Trump administration realized that they take action a lot earlier, it's going to be better. You know, at least so that we may lose we may have a change. We may have a change in the political environment, but at least that we don't lose the war. So I think that but still, because we're talking about the long-term peace in the Middle East, any negotiation, it's a must. You have to give a try. So you have to, see if it's possible. I mean, I think this is a more responsible way of handling the situation. Yeah, I think they are trying very hard, but however, the Iranian regime is not trustworthy. Um, it's in the this kind of a statue situation. You don't know what is the best, but you have to just give it a try.
Well, I guess that's what Trump is doing. He is flying in the face of the past seven presidents and taking action against Iran when none of the previous presidents did, though all of them seemed to know that they should have done something. None of them did anything. And now Trump is trying to do something. And the political opposition, which, if it takes over the House, would control the purse strings, would it not?
Well, I don't know. I'm hoping at least some of the Democrats, some of the Democrat representative will come forward to support this. I mean, we're talking about the human rights. We're talking about you look at that. There's a lot of minorities, like especially the Iranians, all around the world and in the United States. They're all dancing on the street. They all celebrate what's going on in Iran, and they're all hoping. I think that worth support, and from the our Democratic Party leaders. I just don't see it. So far there's only one or two Democratic leaders that come forward to give the support. I don't know why, they're not supporting it. It's good for think about this. Uh, it's all these years, ever since Jimmy Carter, we kind of are seeing that the Iran just going downhill. Wonderful country, wonderful civilization.
Wonderful, yeah, wonderful civilization.
Yeah, yeah, and then it's a lot about human rights, about women's rights, about everything, that the democratic leaders actually has been supporting. And why I just don't see why they're just not supporting this, you know. I
Well,
don't have an answer for that.
the obvious answer is that they don't like Donald Trump,
Well,
and anything that Donald Trump is for, they're against.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I think there should be on the foreign policy. You see the great airlines between Democrats and the Republicans on the China policy. They have a lot to talk about that. They're moving in the same direction. But however, when it comes to the Iran, they're just sharply divided. But however, we all know that the China is behind Iran, right? So I don't know why, there's something that just cannot be settled between the two political parties. To me, it's a total bizarre.
Kind of like husband and wife who have agreed to separate no matter what. And that's where we're at with Republicans and Democrats. Well, in China, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning claimed that during a regular press briefing that China had a big hand in mediating the ceasefire between Iran and the United States. But nobody else seems to recognize that fact. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, we don't know, from Mao Ning's mouth, the Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson, you don't know how many truths her words was. Right now, what we know is Pakistan is trying to mediate it between the United States and Iran. They're in talk. And also the rumors around it's that Vice President J.D. Vance is going to fly there this weekend. So hopefully something is going to happen. And at least we know now based on the True Social that Trump sent out some sort of tweet, and also that the White House spokesperson Levitt, that the so-called 10 points peace deal that from Iran, that's a total joke. That's just, that doesn't, I'm not seeing any help from the media. I mean, they're just making troubles for this war. I remember the beginning of the week that when the news that came out that the two American fighter jet pilots were down and one of them rescued, and then the media all of a sudden start talking about that, and then that's just not very, very irresponsible. I mean, we have one rescue mission that's going on. Why, can you guys just wait for a few hours to publish that kind of news that's just put American life in jeopardy? Just totally not responsible.
Well, Xi Jinping would not have to worry about that kind of press coverage, would he?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that all these so-called 10-point peace deal. Everybody with common sense, you look at the 10-point peace deal, proposed by Iranian regime. That's a non-starter basically. It's not going to happen. And then that's just that's just a total joke, and the media love to report it. I which I totally disagree. I think that all these medias, I don't know what their true purpose is. I think that's hurting Americans, and it's hurting the free war. And then I remember that I saw a movie that the Post, you're talking about the Washington Post that exposed the so-called the Pentagon some sort of leaking documents about that how the Vietnam War stopped. And
Oh, the Washington Post.
yeah, Washington. I think that's totally irresponsible. I think that's a totally BS. And then
It's
when you
certainly
look
a
at the entire
danger.
human history, there was a lot of times that the staff members will say one thing, but the generals will make a different decision. Eventually, the general is right, and then they eventually win the war. So those things happen and happen again. And a staff member's analysis is just not something that you should use to really promote whatever your idea is to win the public opinion. That's just nonsense. Um, and then still until today, the American still says the Vietnam War it's a wrong time, wrong enemy, wrong location, and wrong place. A wrong war. Hey, all you need to do is just go ask those Vietnamese. We have a lot of Vietnamese came to United States after we lost Vietnam War. Ask them if they think that's a wrong war, wrong place, wrong enemy, uh, wrong time. I don't think they agree. I think a lot of these things American medias are doing, they are just totally lost their moral ground.
Well, in many respects, the America media or conventional media is very much behind the positions espoused by the Democrat Party. I just read an article in Vanity Fair about about Xi Jinping, and it was suggesting that if by the writer that if Trump really wanted to make a deal with Xi Jinping, he would read this article and pay close attention to the character of Xi Jinping. And I went through and read the article, and it was as if it was as if they were writing about George Washington and how he cut down the cherry tree, and he was so honest. And I thought, my goodness, when I grew up, that's the way people used to write about our president. But it's totally the opposite. The press is now writing as if Xi Jinping was George Washington, in spite of the fact that he's killed all of these people.
I think that whoever write that article, he should move China. That's a country with a better leader, right? If he believes so, I mean, he should move to China and then live there for another 10 years or 20 years and see how his life is going to
Or
be.
maybe just 1 year. Try to have one different opinion in China and see what happens. Now, Mao Ning is actually conducting regular press conferences. Is that a sign that China is trying to emulate uh, our relationship with the press? We have press briefings all the time here, in which Trump's spokesperson stands up and communes with the press, often adversarial, but they talk. Is this something that China is doing, or is this an open press conference, or is he just issuing statements without fielding questions from the press?
Well, first of all, the environment in China is totally different. You don't imagine that there's same kind of environment in at the White House press briefing room. It's totally different. In China, yes, they do this kind of a briefing all the time. It's been like that for a few decades, ever since the 80s. And then but also it's very important. A lot of media they know what to ask. They know what not to ask. It's not the kind of environment you see in the White House briefing room nowadays. In China, there are some basically things you can ask, or there are things that you shouldn't ask. If you don't know that, then you'll be out of there in no time. They will not give you the media pass. So, and also there's very often very often they will arrange some foreign medias over there to ask the questions they want them to ask. You know, we find out that in the past, the Chinese communist regime, they make a deal because that's a media with a tremendous amount. The regime, it has tremendous amount of money. All they need to do is just give certain so-called foreign media, or media from the West, some money, and then they will basically make some sort of agreement and have that. In the past, and it happened a lot, that the media will ask the questions that will pave the way for the communist regime's spokesperson to say something that they want to say to the world.
So it's
So
like it's like throwing a fastball right down the middle of the plate so that the batter can hit it out of the park, right?
right, that's what's happening in China. But they do have certain room for some of the major American media to ask a few some questions. But if you don't, but they often, the worst come to the worst, it's just they just repeat their lies when they ask the questions.
Here in the United States, the press conferences that I watch is the press is pretty adversarial in that, it seems like we're out to find out what you're trying to hide. And
Well,
in
yeah,
China,
well,
it's
see,
almost the opposite. We're here to help you hide what you want to hide.
that's right. Well, you have to understand. Well, see, media, it's always playing the role. We try to find out what you hide, right? They
Yes.
want a little more, that more than just the public information, so they can serve their audience or their readers.
Yeah.
This is while this is natural, but sometimes you often see some of the media, they ask the questions in a bizarre way. I saw that it was just I'm not sure. It was just the week, 1 or maybe 10 days after the war, that there was seven Americans die in the Middle East. Our servicemen and women die. The seven, and then I saw there was a one White House briefing that the one I forgot which media reporter was it, and then she basically asked, there were already seven American die, and how many you plan uh to see these kind of things? How many more
Oh, okay.
you're
Yeah.
going to plan? Come on, nobody will. This is just entirely make me. I mean, I totally do not understand why you ask it that kind of a question. That's just more or less like a evil, right?
It's more of an accusation than a question. You're killing
Well,
people, and
nobody
why do you want to
will.
kill so many
I
people?
don't think anybody want more Americans to die. This is common sense, right? And
Yeah.
then they ask the question. It's just like it make it sounds like the administration want to see more Americans to die in Iran. That's just nonsense, right? It's what I'm questioning the mentality behind this question. Oh, do they want to see more Americans die in Iran, or what? Or they're, why they're coming to this kind of a question? That's just totally
Yeah,
uh,
it's more of an
against the logic,
accusation. It's
right?
more of an accusation than a question. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is China Now, Sue Michael Olson. It is peacetime in the Middle East. There, at least the peace is hanging by the proverbial thread as we speak. They're fighting in throughout the Middle East still, especially in uh, Israel and around Israel. They're still fighting, and they're still bottling up the traffic going in and out of the Hormuz Strait, and that's Iran's job. But there is peace, at least for the time being, for a couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about Trump is going tariffing again. Terrible tariffing. Right back. China Now. Stay tuned.
Your business needs more space? Space is reasonable, secured, and accessible 24/7 for qualified businesses at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard. Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
The kid is moving her family to Sacramento. Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul has the moving vans, car trailers, and shipping boxes she needs ready to go. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard. Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
Attention investors. This is a simple commercial on the investment value of gold. Gold continues to make new highs. In good markets and in bad markets, you need to have your portfolio balanced with gold. Learn about owning physical gold or getting a gold-backed IRA. Make this simple call right now.
800-414-1657. 800-414-1657. That's 800-414-1657.
Sponsored by Reagan Gold.
There's more than one way to enjoy the benefits of cannabis. Hi, I'm Johnny from the Hook Outlet in Capitola, Santa Cruz, and Watsonville. With topicals, the Hook Outlet has many topical preparations that provide localized relief for pain and inflammation of muscles and joints without psychoactive effects. The Hook Outlet has a friendly staff to help you select the right topical for your needs. Pain relief, anyone? Stop by and say hi at the Hook Outlet in Capitola, Santa Cruz, and Watsonville.
Find us fast online at hookoutlet.com.
The weather will change. Knox Roofing here. We all remember the story of the three little pigs. We all know the third pig hired Knox Roofing to do his roof. Every day he crawls into his home knowing no wind, no earthquake, fire, or even the big bad wolf can hurt his house. The weather will change for the good and sometimes not so good. Have a Knox roof installed on your home, and one thing you can be certain of, good security. I promise you that. The number to call is 461-0634. Thanks, folks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, coming on the heels of the 2-week ceasefire that Donald Trump announced here a couple of days ago, he also announced that he is placing a 50% tariff on all goods from countries that sell weapons to Iran. That's a pretty big hit for anything made in China. Going to cost half again as much. My goodness sakes. Pretty powerful message to China and its efforts in Iran, and also coming before his trip to Beijing to discuss all kinds of things with Xi Jinping. So it's a pretty bold move, don't you think, Nansu?
Well, see, this is a Trump, the deal, art of a deal, right? If he doesn't have a bargaining chip, or he doesn't feel he has enough bargaining chip, he will just go create some. So I think that but this one, I think this one absolutely right. We spend I don't know how many billions of dollars in the past months to destroy Iranian regime's weapon system, and we can't let them just rebuild it, right? So if Iran try to rebuild it, and then China will be benefiting from it because China will keep getting the cheap oil from Iran, and then Iran will use those money. They don't care about the money. All they just care is about their crazy extreme religious belief. So and plus they're just sitting on a big oil tank. The whole country
Yeah.
just sitting on a big oil tank, oil field. So they don't care about the money. So they will quickly rebuild them, and then I don't think that's a good idea to let China continuously provide all kind of weapon and technologies to Iran. I think that this is a right move. And for one, you cut off the cheap oil supply from Iran to China, and two, it will effectively prevent Iran from getting the kind of weapons that will put the entire Western world in danger.
You know, you're right, and to your point about them not caring about money, as we open up the show with today, my speculation is that the only thing that the Chinese Communist Party cares about is the Chinese Communist Party, and similarly, the um, mullahs in Iran, I don't think they care about the people of Iran. They just care about their their religion there and their religious organization that now runs the country in the same way the CCP runs China. So and money means nothing because they have the oil, and all they have to do is wait out the United States, and the oil will be there, and the money from China will be there because we're giving China all the money to buy the oil from Iran. It's kind of funny how we've got ourselves worked into this situation. Thankfully, there's the United Nations. Oh, but wait a minute. The United Nations came up with a plan to uh, open up the Hormuz Straits, but guess who stopped them from implementing that? That would be China and the Russia. So it goes on, doesn't it, Nansu?
Well, I don't think that we can put our trust to UN. You know, UN's totally corrupted. You know, China and all these years they use the money. You know, they have a totally corrupt UN. And then China, it's got a voting army in the UN membership, and then you can see all these kind of countries in the Africa, South America, and some of the Asian countries. Uh, you know, China gave them most of them already, you know, joined the Belt and Roads project, and basically China used their money uh, to really just basically make a UN a place for China to put up the show that they want.
And there they are. So it looks like China and Russia are coordinating their efforts to stop things in the United Nations. So two against one, they win. At least in the United Nations, they did.
Yeah, so I think that we shouldn't put our trust to China. Basically, that's just not going to work. That's a non-starter.
Yeah. Well, it appears as though China took a slap on the face when we attacked their client state of Iran. I don't know if Iran would admit to being a client state of China, but they certainly were working together as one. Now, one of the things that I thought we should discuss today was that the leader of Taiwan's opposition party is now in Beijing, getting ready to visit with Xi Jinping. Now, the opposition party in Taiwan is the Kuomintang Party. And my first question to you, Nansu, is how did the Kuomintang Party of Chiang Kai-shek end up being the opposition party or the party most in favor of reuniting with China? How did that happen?
Well, today's Kuomintang party it's totally changed. It's very different than the way it was before. Okay, so what happened
The way
is
it was before, as I mentioned, was the party of Chiang Kai-shek. And it was the party that the Chinese Communist Party chased out of mainland China, uh, and something happened to change its nature.
uh, well, what happened is after Kuomintang they lost after they basically lost the civil war. After they lost the civil war, what they have done is they went to Taiwan And after they went to Taiwan, um, what happened is that basically a lot of them, because their hometown it's in mainland China, right? So therefore, they have a lot of kind of connections, and also they want to go back, um, you know, because
So
they want.
they felt like they were refugees in a stranger in a strange land, I guess, in
Uh,
Taiwan, and they missed their home turf.
yes, so that was the situation basically for years. You know, for years. Now, however, after 19, I think in the early 1980s, China start open up, right? So when China start open up, that what we see is that a lot of Taiwanese business they start going to China, and and using those as an opportunity, the Chinese Communist regime has been really penetrate into Taiwan. Now, so
It would seem to be the easiest way for China to take over Taiwan is to just do business with Taiwan, make friends, and subsume Taiwan that way rather than this military invasion.
well, basically, the Kwame down changed quite a bit, because in the beginning there was a lot of Taiwan businessmen go to China do business, and then and what so gradually, just like what China has been doing in the United States,
Yeah.
gradually, using those as an opportunity, the Chinese Communist regime gradually they start you gradually basically you can see that um they kind of going to um the politics of Taiwan. So that's basically what happened.
Sure.
Um,
And the
so once they
economy, and like you said, a lot of people in Taiwan were doing business in China with their manufacturing plants and this and that. A lot of cooperation there. What happened? And as you said, just like China was doing here in the United States, what the heck happened to China that made it decide that that approach was no longer efficacious, and that it now had to be the big bully wolf warrior? What changed in China that made that change? What got into their head?
uh well uh it's the same, it's the same that what you see what happened in the United States, right? You have Wall Street, you have people that are doing business in China, then
Everybody was happy. We were making a lot of money, and China was growing like a weed. And then all of a sudden, China becomes this wolf warrior. We're going to take over everything. My goodness. You remember just a couple of years ago, and we watched as Secretary of State Anthony Blinken sat across the table from the Chinese in Anchorage, and the Chinese told him, "You're not worth us talking to." Whereas we were friends and doing business, all of a sudden, China started treating us as adversaries.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately what happened, right?
Or maybe fortunately, because if they, it seems to me, had they kept treating us nicely and everybody was making money, they probably would be running the country by now.
Well, that's just not going to happen, right? Because they run the way they run their foreign relationship, it's same way they run their own country, the politics inside China. It's always coercive and in this suppressing way against their own people. If they are doing the things doing to their own people, basically it's just the time that they're going to show their true nature once they have money, how they're going to deal with the international society.
You
It
know,
will
that's
be the same way. It just sooner or later the international society will find out all their wishful thinking is just never going to come true.
uh, well, in many respects, I'm happy that their true nature revealed itself because they were well on their way to taking over the world, it seemed to me.
Yeah, it's true.
And we were very fortunate that we woke up to that fact. So, at any rate, there are a lot of indications that Xi Jinping is feeling his oats with respect to his relationship with the opposition party, the Kuomintang. What do you think is going to be the consequence of his in-person meeting with the head of the Kuomintang in Beijing?
See, Kuomintang's it has become less and less popular in Taiwan. Basically in the past, I would say uh past the 12 years,
Mhm.
uh, and even longer, ever since 2005, that was the first time Kuomintang's leader went to Beijing. So they and see the Communist Party leader. So they have been doing that for what, almost 20, like more than 20 years. So that's what Kuomintang has been doing because and many Kuomintang party leaders they have their families or relatives or friends doing business in China. They're making tons of money. They're making tons and tons of money in China. Of course, when they go there, they know that the opportunity is given wherever they want to do. The government will pave the way for them to do it, for them to make money in China. Uh, so that they're totally corrupted and and so and also the Kuomintang's basic camp, they had their supporters, their basic voting army, they have become less and less because a lot of people who either the first generation that moved after they lost China, the mainland China to Communist Party, they moved to Taiwan between 1945 and 49, and there are people those people are dying, and then the next generation are dying too. So more and more young people they grew up in Taiwan now, and those old people they're moving on basically. So Kuomintang has become less and less and less popular in Taiwan. Um, so they
Isn't
still have
isn't
influence, but they became less and less popular.
isn't that the same thing that's happening in China itself? The as the old little pinks age out, and I guess Xi Jinping himself is a little pink when it gets right down to it. He was a son of the revolution. As those people age out and young people are coming up and looking around and seeing that all the goodies have been collected by the old folks and there's nothing left for them. So what do they think about the Chinese Communist Party?
Uh, China it's little different than Taiwan. You know, Taiwan you're literally talking about in very open society. You know, probably as open as the United States, right? So they travel all around the world. They have a freedom. They have democracy, and they have all these things going on.
That
Uh,
China could have going on.
yeah, but in China it's totally different, right? So you still have this brainwashing and also the elite of China, the intelligent people, those academic people, though they have deep interests tied to the Communist Party, so they have a tremendous power to influence the population in China. Um, and even though nowadays you have a big population living in the city, but still in China, you have what? You have more than half of the population living in the countryside, and their day-to-day life, it's totally out of the world that we can imagine here. So they don't have all these. They don't go to the internet. They don't search the information like you and I do every day, and they don't know the outside world. It's totally different. So I would say this. I would say that uh, you basically we cannot compare China with Taiwan. So we can have that kind of a wishful thinking that
Just like we can't compare the United States with China
that's
because we're two
correct.
different organisms
See
entirely.
that very often that the people, especially the media people, or I don't know, they are trying to think Taiwan in the way that following our own mentality, thinking what's going to happen, facing the similar situation here in the United States. That's just totally wishful thinking.
Yes, and that's why they write about Xi Jinping as if he was the George Washington cutting down the cherry tree and never telling a lie. My goodness sakes, ladies and gentlemen, where's the press? Where is the press? I guess that's what.
Well, I'm have we have seen, all these how these press work, right? And I think last week they saw there was like a Salamani's relative or niece or something that here in the United States became a academic. Something, what is he going to teach our American kids? That's just worrying me.
Yeah, amen. Okay, and so what do you think the Kuomintang thinks it can get out of the Chinese Communist Party that made it worth Qing Li Yuan's efforts to go there? What is she going to get from Xi Jinping?
They want, as I say, the Kuomintang is totally corrupted, and then they kind of like, um, uh, they're less and less popular, in Taiwan, but they are still have certain influence, and now, you look at that the Zheng Liwen, the head of KMT party, and she went to China. She went to the Sun Yat-sen's um, uh, memorial place, and then she made a
And
speech.
we should make note of the fact that Sun Yat-sen was one of the first advocates for democracy. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, Sun Yat-sen established the very first republic country
Yeah.
in Asia, and he came to United States to study. And I believe when he was 10 years old, he studied in Hawaii, and then he went back to China. Uh, he promoted the so-called the Three Peoples idealism, and then the so-called the three peoples idealism. It's the government of the people, by the people, for the people. You can see that where it's from. It's from United States, and then he tried to combine uh, the United States, our founding fathers and our political system from Abraham Lincoln, all combined together, trying to mix that, blend it into Confucianism. That's how he created the political system for the Republic of China, which is still this government still continues until today in Taiwan after they lost the mainland China to the Communist Party. Uh, now, so in China, they still have this memorial service, or or the monument, all these things are built to recognize Sun Yat-sen. Okay,
Right?
because the Communist Party they have to recognize him. Why? Because Sun Yat-sen was the one that throw away the last dynasty of China, the Qing dynasty,
Yeah.
and the many, I will say most of the first generation Communist Party leaders, like Chairman Mao, like Zhou Enlai, they were all a part of Sun Yat-sen's government to start with. And later they rebelled. They left the Sun Yat-sen's government again. They rebel against him, and then unfortunately Sun Yat-sen himself died in 1925. And after he died, another 24 years later, communists took over control of China. Now, but however, they couldn't deny Sun Yat-sen's contribution, so they have to recognize it, because most of the first generation communist leaders like Chairman Mao, Zhou Enlai, they were all part of that revolution, to make China to change, become to change it from the
Yeah.
dynasty system to the modern nation. So they can't deny his contribution. So in China, they still have these kind of monuments, or all kind of a memorial, kind of like a park or whatever, built to recognize his contribution. Now, Zheng Liwen, the current KMT party leader, when she went to China, and she has to pay a visit to the memorial place in Nanjing City. That's the central government place before KMT party lost control of China, and she went there. She made a speech, and and it was a shame, big shame, to her speech didn't mention any civil rights.
Right.
Because China, it's the biggest civil rights violation in the country,
Yeah.
in the world, and one of Sun Yat-sen's idea is civil rights. And all she did was to criticize Japan. She criticized Japan for invading China, and she could basically bring all the World War II history back, um, and for the reason that the Japan right now trying to help Taiwan to defend itself, right? Japan is
Oh,
making the big deal.
that's a pretty interesting commentary. We're gonna pick that up when we come back from the top of the hour news break. Lots of things happening in the South China Sea. And since everybody's been paying attention to Iran, nobody's been watching what's going on with China. So we'll have a look when we come back. Do stay tuned. This is China Now. 再见。